think we can go ahead and get started. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ashley, and I'm a bookseller at Brookline Booksmith just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I'll be your host for today's conversation with Danielle Saldaña París and Alejandro Zambra to discuss Ramifications, Danielle's most recent book, translated by Christina McSweeney. The Transnational series focuses on stories of migration, the intersection of politics and literature, and works in translation. The series was launched in early 2018, and while we miss having in-person events at the store, we love having this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. I just want to offer a quick Zoom webinar tutorial. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a few icons. One of those is a Q&A icon where you can enter in your questions at any time during the conversation. Another button will get you to the chat window. That is a space for you all. Please feel free to chat during the event. My colleague Pierce will be in the chat as well, dropping in useful information, including links to books by our authors. We do make every effort to keep these events free to attend in the hopes that you will purchase the featured books from us. So thank you in advance for taking a look and supporting independent bookstores. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you, so relax and please enjoy the conversation. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Danielle Saldaña París and Alejandro Zambra. Danielle Saldaña París is an essayist, poet, and novelist born in Mexico City. His first novel, Among Strange Victims, also translated by Christina McSweeney, was published to critical acclaim in 2016 and was a finalist for the Best Translated Book Award. He has been a fellow at the Union des Écrivains and des Écrivains Québécois, the OMI International Arts Center, the Banff Center, and the MacDowell Colony. His work has appeared in Bomb, Guernica, LitHub.com, Electric Literature, The Guardian, El País, and KCRW's Unfictional, among others. In 2017, he was named by the Hay Festival as one of the best Latin American writers under the age of 40. And today's moderator, Alejandro Zambra, is the author of My Documents, which was a finalist for the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, and the novels Bonsai, The Private Lives of Trees, Ways of Going Home, and Multiple Choice, all translated by Megan McDowell. His latest novel, Poeta Chileno, will be published by Viking Books early next year. His stories have appeared in The New Yorker, Paris Review, Harper's, Tin House, and McSweeney's, among others. In 2010, he was named one of Granta's best young Spanish language novelists, and he is the 2015-2016 Coleman Center Fellow at the New York Public Library. He lives in Mexico City. And so I'm so pleased to have them here together in conversation. And now, Danielle and Alejandro.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm just gonna wait for Alejandro to join in. But first, thank you all for being here and for being patient with our broken English. I'm gonna start by reading a couple of pages from Ramifications, just for those who haven't read the book to get a sense of the beginning of the story. It's going to be the first couple of pages, so just so you get an inkling of the book and the rhythm, which is obviously wonderfully translated by Christina McSweeney. So every good thing about the book is probably due to her. And it starts like this. Teresa walked out one Tuesday around midday. I can't remember exactly which month, but it must have been either the end of July or the beginning of August, because my sister and I were still on vacation. I always hated being left in the care of Mariana, who systematically ignored me for the whole day, barricaded in her room with the music playing at a volume that even to me, a boy of 10, seemed ridiculous. So that Tuesday, I resented it when Mom got up from the table after lunch and announced she was going out. Look after your brother, Mariana, she said in a flat voice. That was the way she generally spoke, with hardly any intonation, like a computer giving instructions or someone on the autism spectrum. Even now, When no one else is around, I sometimes imitate her, and it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that writing this in some form is in some form an effort to find an echo of that monotone voice in the written word. Teresa, my mother, kissed the crown of my head and then turned to Mariana, who received her farewell peck on the cheek without the least show of emotion or any attempt to return the gesture. When your dad gets home, tell him there's a letter for him on his night table, she said from the door in the same robotic voice. Then she left, turning the key behind her. She had no luggage besides the large tote bag my father used to make wisecracks about whenever we went somewhere together. Just what you have in just have you what have you got in there? It looks like you are going camping. When he got back that evening, my father read the letter. Then he sat with us in the living room. My sister was watching music videos while I was trying to make an origami figure and explained that mom had gone away. Camping, I thought. On Tuesday in July or August, one Tuesday in July or August 1994, she, my mother, Teresa, went camping. My interest in origami had begun at that same summer, not long before the events just mentioned. At school, during recess, I used to perch on one of the planters and pull leaves off the shrubs. I would fold each leaf down the middle, hoping to achieve perfect symmetry. Then I'd attempt to extract the petiole and the midrib. I liked calling the stalk of the leaf the petiole and the central axis from which the veins branch out or ramify the midrib. It had I had just learned those terms in class and thought that using them made me sound mature and knowledgeable. I'd remove the midrib and petiole, put them in the pocket of my pants, and forget about them. In the afternoon, when I was back home, I'd empty the contents of my pockets and line up the petioles and midribs on my table. Sitting before my booty, I take out my sheets of colored paper and my origami manual, and with a patience I no longer have, start folding. I saw my compulsion to fold the leaves of those shrubs as a form of training for origami, a ritual practice I could carry out in secret that would help enhance my manual skills. But the truth is that I was never much good at origami. For all the effort I put into it, I made no progress at all. Teresa had given me the book with 10 basic designs a few weeks before she went camping, before disappearing with her enormous tote bag that Tuesday after lunch. The book included the colored squares of paper, and among the figures it explained how to make were the iconic crane, the frog, and the balloon. In all three cases, my lack of skill was notable. I remember thinking when Teresa handed me the book, wrapped in fluorescent paper, that it was a strange time to give me a present, as my birthday was months away and my mother didn't go in for surprises. But I said nothing. I wasn't going to complain about an unseasonable gift. It would be unfair to lay the blame for my failure on the book. I tried using the origami manuals and the result was just the same. Even now, 23 years afterwards, I'm still incapable of making that stupid crane. I was never able to work out the diagrams. For me, they were indecipherable riddles, with their dotted lines and the curved arrows. I never learned to distinguish when they were referring to the front and when the reverse sides of the sheets. Now that I'm an adult who never leaves his bed, I'm tempted to say that I still suffer from that problem and that it permeates my understanding of the world. I always confuse front and reverse. But that metaphor isn't valid. It seems empty of meaning even though it indicates something true. In 1994, everything was charged with meaning, but my confusion of front and reverse was simply the confusion of a boy trying to make origami figures and repeatedly failing in the attempt. And neither can I say that the tenacity I exhibited in continuing to practice origami in the face of constant failure has made me adept in the exercise of patience. What is certain is that origami was a school for being alone. It taught me to spend many hours in silence. So that's the first couple of pages. Also, I want to say thanks to Brookline Booksmith for having us, and mostly to Alejandro Zambra, who I greatly admire, and it's a great honor to be in his company always, and even if we are speaking in English now.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I cannot say Daniel, you know, but
I know.
it's Daniel, but I have to say that Daniel, and I were practicing for this event for months. I mean, we were speaking English between ourselves in order to make it flow since December, and later the event had to be rescheduled, so we keep practicing until today. Well, this is not true, of course, but I wish it was, because in that case we would be less nervous. I just wanted to make visible the weirdness of talking in a second language with Daniel, but we've been living in total weirdness for a year now, so why not? I would like, I don't know, I like this novel so much that everything I will say about this novel in English or in Spanish will sound like a blurb. So I'm just going to ask Daniel some things, starting with the title. You know, the original title in Spanish is El Nervio Principal, which in English means midriff.
Yeah, midriff.
Midriff. I have to say that I love
which is exactly this, like the, you know, like this, the central part of the leaf. That's
now I understand the spot.
Exactly, it was carefully picked.
Perfect background, yes. I love both titles, El Nervio Principal and Ramifications. I think both of them deal beautifully with the narration. Actually, if I were forced to choose one of them, I wouldn't know what to do. I want you to tell us how did you get to the original title in Spanish, and then what happened when Christina and you discussed a new title for the English version.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. I think the original title, El Nervio Principal, I mean, the El Nervio Principal means, like, literally it's the midrib, but it also evokes something else, because it's like literally you could translate it like the central nerve, or the central nerve, I guess, or the main nerve. But in Spanish, the original title came to me. It was probably the last thing that came to me. I had already written the whole book, and I didn't have a title yet, which is something that usually happens to me. Like, I usually change the title a few times while writing the book, and I leave the final decision of the title for the last minute. And in this case, it was actually Anna, my partner, my wife, Anna Negri, who is also a writer and a wonderful reader. And she was the first reader of my book, and she read the book, and I was struggling to find the title, and I asked her to tell me if she had any ideas as for what to call the book. And she came up with it. She said, well, I think the most natural choice would be to call it El Nervio Principal, the midrib, which is something that you find from as you could see in my reading, right from the beginning, from the first paragraphs, the word, the midrib is there. And I wasn't convinced at first, because I usually like titles that are like a mystery, and you come to understand the meaning of the title further down the road, like when you are through the reading halfway through the book, you suddenly realize what the title means. But in this case, I thought it was pretty straightforward to have it as a title and in the first couple of paragraphs. And I liked it. I liked the idea of having a straightforward title. So I agreed with Anna and her suggestion that it would be a good title. And then when Christina McSweeney was doing the translation, she told me, I think it doesn't work as well in English. The word midrib is kind of a deaf word, I would say. Like it's not a very, doesn't have like a nice ring to it for a title. So she made a couple of suggestions, and among them was ramifications, which I thought it was a very clever suggestion to make, because it's already an interpretation of the book. Like I love the fact that when you translate something, you are constantly making an interpretation and yes, like making your own reading and making the book your own. So in a way, ramifications points to a different aspect of the book that was not highlighted in the original title, but that is as important as the original title, I guess, which is the fact that every decision you make at some point in your life is gonna have consequences and ramifications further on. So I liked the idea of highlighting that specific aspect of the book from the title. And also I just love the sound of the word ramifications, which is much better than midrib. And so I told Christina that it was my favorite option. And she kind of sneaked in a couple of mentions of that word throughout the book. Maybe where I would use another word, she would put ramify here and there, or she would just a couple of times. And I don't know if I'm revealing too much of her magic with this information, but I think it's very intelligent, and it's a very wise way of proceeding, just to pick the title and then like very subtly leave the word here and there throughout the book to make it like a ritornello, like a theme that you find over and over again throughout the novel. And so that's basically the story of the title, or both titles.
And Nervio Principal also has another meanings, you know, that not good ones, not the correct ones, you know, because if you don't know that the actual meaning, you get to some feelings, you know, like nervio and main. So I really like the way both titles work, and what and how they deal with the book, you know. Another thing, well, I have this quote I love so much. I'm gonna read, it's just 2 lines. Paper has that drawback. It's made to remember all our errors, whether it's when writing on it, as I do now, or when folding and unfolding it as I did then. I read it terribly. But I can put it in this chat, you know.
Oh, I can write it down.
I have it here because I don't really like the way I.
Oh, don't worry about it. We can just.
Yeah. But we can post it. We can post it in technology, right. You know.
Yeah, we have to
chatear.
Take advantage of the.
For everybody. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So there's a quote.
That's what I try to read.
You read it?
Yeah, but I love this
Fine.
quote so much because this is a novel about the honorable art of origami and also, in a way, about handwriting. Can you tell us a little about it?
Yes, of course. As you know, sometimes you realize things about your own book after it's already published. Like usually when you're writing, like you obviously know things and you plan things out and you have like a general notion and an idea of what you want to do. But then there are like many meanings attached to it that you start discovering, like you first discover once it's published. And the importance of paper within the book is something that I think it was pointed out by Veronica Gerber, who was the first presentator, the first person who did the launch event with me, and she's a wonderful writer and reader as well. And she pointed out that it was very interesting how paper was so important to the plot and to the general meaning and the metaphors of the book. And I think it's true. I mean, he's writing this story, which is something I wanted from the beginning. I wanted him to be writing and not just thinking this story aloud, or not telling the story to someone, but rather I liked the idea of him, the narrator, like physically writing while on his bed. And also, well, origami is there from the beginning as well. So the idea was that once you make a mark on a piece of paper, it kind of is forever. Like you cannot undo that. And I've tried, like, for example, for a while I wrote many notebooks. I used to have like, well, I still have my diary, my journal. And I once tried to erase everything. So the parts that were with with a pencil, written with a pencil, I tried to actually erase them with an eraser. And then the parts that were with ink, I would go and cross it out with liquid paper. And it's impossible to undo what you have written on paper. You can do it obviously on the computer, but on paper it's not as easy. And there's always something there. Like you cannot return the paper to the original virginity of it, where you cannot ever have the blank page again once you have written. And I think it's the same with memory in many ways. I mean, this is a metaphor that is not mine. It's been used several times, and I think it's somewhere there in Platon or Plato or some of the Greeks. But I think it's true. I mean, memory is also like a blank page that once it's somehow marked, you cannot undo that folding. You cannot undo that mark with ink or with folding. So the metaphor of paper and memory was very useful to me because it's also like an homage to the 20th century, to the part of the 20th century that I lived, which is the last decade. But I still love like the materiality of paper, and I love the act of having my favorite notebook and writing on it. So I wanted to work around that, like to have that texture and that that feeling within the book. I wanted it to be more something you can touch. And yeah, that's I guess that's my answer.
Perfect. I love it. I also wanted to talk about the gender. The narrator wants to like male things and looks for male role models. And at the same time, he's not really interested in his father. Most of the time, he just doesn't like him, which is not something unusual, but he even rejects things traditionally associated to masculinity. Also, he seems to be searching and in a way wants to get involved in a feminine world that rejects him and his dad. I don't know whether my question is about masculinity and femininity or femininity, or about the fathers and sons. Maybe another level is about the blind spot of being a son, and how we miss our parents' motivations.
Yes, that's a
Many
great
things
question
to talk about.
that's a tough one. It's a hard question,
Yeah.
but I love it. I think, yes, gender is pretty much also like at the center of the book and of this character's mindset. I mean, he's constantly trying to, as you said, find a role model for being a man, I guess. But all the role models available seem awful, which is pretty common, I guess, not only in Mexico, but especially in Mexico. Like I remember growing up, like the role models of masculinity and the men that you were supposed to imitate or look up to were mostly horrible people, like mostly just dicks. And it was like I remember trying to find that other role model like within my close circles. Like my I know like my I'm kind of speaking ill of my father here, of course, but he's not like the father in the novel, luckily for me. And he's a very sensitive father, and he was really close to me, and I spent many years with him, just living the two of us, and it was like a great experience. But other than that, outside of the family, like most of the role models you see in popular culture or within the close circles around the family are usually horrible. And for example, like there's this idea that it's impossible to communicate with another man unless you are talking about soccer, which I don't like. I don't especially like soccer. I know you do, and I don't want to hurt your.
I don't like it. I don't like it
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
No, no.
Okay. Anymore. I like the specification of anymore. Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I do. I mean, I can watch a couple of games and it's fine, but it has like such a strong uh, space in this culture, and it's usually meant to be like the common ground with other men. Like you have, if you have to start talking about something with a guy that you don't know, you immediately go to soccer.
I do like soccer. I have to say that there is this beautiful scene where the narrator, the kid, sits with his father and watches the game and pretends he likes soccer for his father to be happy. I mean, I love that scene so much.
Yes, which is it's something strange, because I mean, it's like the boy is being kind of condescending, or in a way he's trying to he's actually pretending, which is not something kids usually do, like pretend something to keep them to keep everything calm or smooth. And I think it says a lot about the character, who in many ways is like an introvert and a very mature kid, but he's also kind of off. Like there's something kind of crazy about him, which at least that's what I tried. And so yes, there's a whole like a reflection on soccer and the importance of soccer within the Mexican culture, and especially among men. But also he's trying to detach himself from those role models that he discovers pretty early on. So he finds out that women are usually more interesting, uh, and he tries to become a part of that kind of. There's like a secret society of women within the book. So the mother only talks more with with his sister, no, and she feels closer in a way to the sister. So I thought I wanted to play with these opposites throughout the book. So there's masculine, feminine, there's right and left, and there's like this common uh, polar worlds where you have to choose one or the other, and he's always trying to navigate those oppositions and trying to switch from one to the other and trying to see how it goes when he pretends to be a part of one or a part or the other of the other. So he's in between those oppositions, and he's always trying to make sense of that middle space he occupies in a way.
Yeah, I found the kid's voice, the narrators, so real. He's a 30-something recreating his life, remembering his childhood, who is stuck in a very bad moment, and it seems that the only thing he can do is to remember. I mean, this book's tenderness is very hard to describe. Actually, I don't know whether to use the word tenderness or not. But, what I try to say is that choosing this point of view is a very risky decision. Also, we all have theories about kids and realism. I mean, my 3-year-old is saying things that many literary critics would consider unrealistic, the whole day is saying unrealistic things. And it is true that sometimes in many novels, kids are like in-between characters that are there to demonstrate theories. But this narrator feels so real. I wanted you to talk a little about the process of finding this voice. I don't know, was it always in the first person, or when did you know that this was going to be a novel in the first person?
Yes, that's also a great question. I started writing on the third person briefly. Like, I had the general idea of the book. I knew I wanted to write something about childhood, and I wanted a main character who was a child, but I didn't know what his voice was going to be, and I didn't know how to approach it. So initially I started off by writing on the third person, and it felt odd, like there was something off. It was not right. And I switched to the first person from the point of view of a kid, and it was really hard to do because I don't really remember how I spoke when I was a kid. I don't have that many kids around me except for the children of my friends. But I didn't have that immediate relationship. I was living in Montreal, so I knew no one around, and I didn't have any relationship, like any way of mimicking that voice, the voice of a kid. So I came up with this solution, which is the character is actually a grown-up remembering. And at some point, what happens is that you don't know if the grown-up is telling the story or is actually just the kid talking. So there's like a coming and going. It goes to the kid's voice and then back to the grown-up, to the adult voice. And I liked this movement of the voices. Like, it's always a first person, but I love the fact that it would change throughout the book, and I liked that feeling. And also, I think it allowed me to work with my own memory, because I have a very bad memory. I don't remember much about my own childhood, and with this specific voice somehow allowed me to remember and to start remembering and to use my own memories for the characters. So yeah, I think it didn't last a long. I mean, it was maybe like a few months I tried with the third person narrator, and then I immediately knew what I had to do, and the rest of it came out pretty naturally.
Yeah, it feels very natural. I mean, and it's really complicated to do so because of that movement. You know, like sometimes you have to believe you are hearing a child. You know, although you know it's an adult. Maybe it's time for questions, or I don't know. I don't know. We have a
Oh yeah, it went
we have
really
time
fast.
for. I have a lot of questions left, but.
So it doesn't look like we have any questions in the Q&A. I will invite everybody that if you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A for us. We'd love to hear from you. But Alejandro, if you want to keep going with maybe another question.
I really like the opportunity of asking Daniel things I don't want people to ask me. So,
Yes, keep going.
So Daniel, is your novel?
When we have more questions, keep going. We love it. Great.
I have two of those questions. You know, one of them you cannot. You don't have to answer it. You know? But is this novel autobiographical? This is the first one. And the second one is, Daniel, you started as a poet. Why did you become a fiction writer?
Thank you. I love that you get to ask me the questions that you hate to answer yourself. But I'm actually gonna quote you because I actually saw an interview that you gave at some point. I think it was for Poeta Chileno, Chilean poet, which is a novel that I really recommend everyone here have to read it once it comes out in English. And I love that you were asked if it was an autobiographical novel, and you said something like 67% of it, which is the perfect answer, because it's crazy, and obviously it's impossible to measure it like that. But I would answer something like that. Like the thing is that I usually use my own memories and the people I know and some of my own traits of character for the different characters in the book. It's not only the narrator or the main character, but I use some of my traits and traits of the people I know for all the different characters in the book. And although like the main storyline, like the plot, is not autobiographical, because the story of the book is that this kid's mother goes on to Chiapas and joins, or we assume she joins, the Zapatista uprising in 1994, and the kid has to stay with his father and his sister in Mexico City. And then at some point he decides to try and find his mother. That's like the general plot, in case you haven't read the book. So that's not the case in my life. It wasn't like that. Like my mother never left for Chiapas and never joined the Zapatista movement. But other aspects of the book are autobiographical. I mean, in a way, I lived with my father for a few years, the two of us alone. So I used some of that feeling of like loneliness, because there was not like another parent at the house, and my father used to work a lot, so I would spend a lot of time alone on my own. And then yeah, some like minor details of the book are autobiographical, but I wouldn't call it an autobiographical novel since the main storyline is not my own.
But I'm not saying it's a bad question. I mean, it's a question that is really hard to answer properly. And at the same time, it is a beautiful question because when you read the novel, you ask yourself that. But it's not like you want to know the truth. You know, it's like you feel there is some kind of truth involved in this narration. So, in a way, writing using the first person deals with this idea, with this illusion of believing that really happened, and I found little details. In many different places of the book, I felt that you were remembering so well what it was like to be a teenager. So anyway, I want you to answer the second question.
Which was
poetry.
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 About poetry, of course.
Yeah.
That's something we have in common, because Alejandro too is a poet and was first a poet before publishing fiction. And I think for me it was pretty natural, because I was never like a poet. I don't think I ever well, I like when I mean, maybe yes, my first book was kind of like very lyricist, like it was a book of poetry, like with a lot of endecasyllables, like very classical form. But then like my second book of poetry was already fiction in a way, like it had characters and it had a sense of humor, or so I would like to think. And I always, like, I started writing like prose poems, which were in a way like small essays or little short stories. So I always felt like between the poetry and something else, which could be essay or fiction. But to me, it wasn't like, and the way it's usually put, the question, like here in Mexico, it's very common that people ask me whenever I have like an interview, a public interview or something, they ask me, how was it to jump, like, ¿cómo fue el salto a la novela? How was it to jump from poetry, to jump from poetry to novel, as it was, you know, like implying or assuming that writing a novel is harder somehow, or that writing a novel is like a proper book or something, which I hate. Like I hate that idea. I mean, I work as a poetry editor, and I'm a reader of mostly poetry, and I think you too. We both read a lot of poetry, and I hate that idea of like making the big jump.
Jumping backwards, no? O sea, hacia atrás. Se dice backwards.
Maybe it's like it would be like falling down or something. I fell down into fiction writing, but anyway. So thank you for your questions, Alejandro.
Okay, great. So we have a few questions from the audience. I would love to start asking a few of those. We'll try to get to all of them if we can. So Andreas asks, have you ever read your early writings? In case you have, how did you feel reading them nowadays?
Okay, so thank you, Andres, for the question. I do. I have all of my notebooks since I was 11 years old. I actually started writing notebooks when I was 11. And I remember this perfectly because I got a pen that was a present from my grandmother, and I decided to start writing because I wanted to use that pen. And it was a beautiful pen that I still have. So I have all of my notebooks, and once in a while I go back to my old notebooks and I read them. And it's a strange feeling. Like before I hated it, but now I'm more at ease with it. Like I like the feeling of being embarrassed by myself. Like I love exposing myself in a way. Like I love the feeling of being embarrassed. It's very intense. Like it's a very intense feeling, and I like exposing myself to it once in a while.
Awesome. So the next question is from Megan McDowell, actually. She asks, hi, Megan. She asks, I remember Among Strange Victims as a pretty crazy book, pretty fantastical. I loved it, and I also loved this one. Ramifications is much more grounded in realism. Could you talk about that shift to realism?
Yes, thank you, Megan. Hello. So I actually it was very hard to write my second novel. It was not an easy process, and I've heard is something that usually happens with second books or second novels. And I think I started to write something that was closer to Among Strange Victims. Like once Among Strange Victims was published, I started writing a second novel that was closer to it in tone, in structure. And I was, in a way, I felt that I was repeating myself, or that I was trying to do the same. And at some point, I didn't feel comfortable with it. I felt it was, I don't know, like it was out of my hand. The book was too long and it had too many characters and it was too chaotic. And also I got fed up with the voice. Like I think I was being too ironic all the time. And I think irony I mean, can be a very clever way of using language, of course, and a very intelligent way of approaching reality. But it can also interpose like a distance between you and the world. And I wanted to be more raw in a way. So I decided to stop using, yeah, like irony, and to approach this book from a completely different point of view, and try to find a new voice within me. And that's how I ended up writing this book, which is true, is much more realistic in a way, and much more grounded, as Megan said. But it also, like, it allowed me to play with my sense of humor on a different scale. Like there's a few jokes here and there, and there's like a tender a, a tender humor to the book that I was able to use at some point, and I was glad I could.
Thank you for that. So Ron asks, the switching voices was incredibly well done. How did you do that as a process, back and forth, or write one voice and then intermingle?
Oh, it's an interesting question about the process. Uh, Thank you, Ron. I think I just wrote it down as it is written. Like I wrote it in the order that you can read it now. I I would go back and forth from one voice to the other one all the time. And yes, yeah, because as I said, like I liked this idea of, I sometimes when I'm writing, I get fed up with one voice. So I like the idea that you can switch and change voices all the time. So I'm not bored with myself. And this book allowed me to do that. So I liked that structure, that solution.
Awesome. So we have the next one from Alex. They say, I haven't read the book, but from what I've heard from the opening section, I was wondering what the reason behind using a nameless narrator.
Okay. Yes, that was a strange choice. So in the book, there's a constant highlighting of differences between the genders in a way. So the female characters, they all have name, and the male characters, they don't. There's a male character that has a nickname, El Rata, the rat. But other than that, I don't think the male characters really have a name. At some point, the narrator chooses his own name, like he comes up with a fictional name he wants to use for himself, like a pseudonym. And I like the idea that the the story is also the process of finding his own name, of coming up with a name to call himself. So that's like the strange reason behind it, but it's also just a decision I made at some point, and then I had to stick to it. So
Perfect. And so our next one is from Thor, and they ask, they also say, I haven't read the book, but I wonder what was your focus or idea to portray Mexico and its political situation? You mentioned there's some of the Zapatista movement in the book. What is part of the message or idea that you can share that you want to transmit with the readers? And then they also said, thank you for the great panel. Saludos.
saludos, gracias. Yes, it's, I mean, I never thought of writing like a political novel. It's not something that I decided. It just happened in a way. It has political, a political meaning or political echo to it. I wanted to write about childhood, and I obviously revisited my own childhood. And as it happens, 1994 was a very important year, both for myself and for my generation, and for the country, because it's the year in which the Zapatista movement came to light, and also a whole bunch of other political events happened in Mexico. No, there was an assassination of a candidate, a presidential candidate, the Zapatista, the signature of the NAFTA agreement with the U.S. and Canada. So it's a crucial year to Mexico in that it shaped the the Mexico we live in today. The neoliberal era started with the signature of the NAFTA agreement, and also, I mean, I was 10 years old as the character, so to me it was also a very important year. It was a defining moment in my life, and I think the fact that these two moments coincided in time was so powerful that I decided to use it for the book. No, in a way, it was a decisive year both for the country and for myself. And also, I love books that tell history from the point of view of a child, like like even I don't know Gunter Grass's El Tambor de Hojalata, which I don't know the title in English, but like books about wars and books about society and political changes, told from the not only from the point of view but even from the height of a kid. Like I love the fact that you saw everything like upwards, and I wanted to have that in the book, to have that vision of not understanding entirely what's going on, but trying to make sense of it. So I wanted to write a novel within that tradition of kids telling the story of a main political or societal change.
Thank you for that. And yeah, that's really incredible. I saw that there was one quick question in the chat from Walton. What are Danielle's criteria for a strong translation of his work? This is.
Well, I mean, in English, obviously for me is a bit easier, and in French, because those are the languages I kind of speak. So it's a bit, and I don't speak as well in English, but I do read a lot in English, and I am a translator myself. I've translated a couple of books into Spanish, from English into Spanish. So I know the challenges of translating, and also the rewards of it. It's a great task, and I think it's amazing, and I really admire translators. And I guess you just feel it in a way. Like with Christina McSweeney, we had like great understanding from the beginning. I usually write reading aloud my own text. Like I write a paragraph and I read it aloud to see how it works, and then I write the next one and I read it aloud, and it's like a proof for me that it works. And if I get stuck in some point reading aloud, I go back to it and change it. And I noticed when Christina McSweeney was translating Among Strange Victims, we went together to a residency in upstate New York in OMA International Arts Center, which is a great program for writers and translators working together. So we got to spend, I think it was 3 weeks together working on the final details of the translation. And I noticed that she would read aloud every paragraph after translating it. So I thought it was perfect because we both had this very poetic relationship with language, in which the music of language was as important as the meaning. And she's a great singer. She's of Irish descent, and she has this lovely voice, and she dances and sings very well. And to me, that was also very important. So now, every time I have a translator, I would love to ask them to sing me a song every time. That would be the perfect proof. Like, okay, yes, I'm gonna answer your questions about the book, but please could you send me a song sung by you? That would be amazing, but I haven't done it. It's too much.
Thank you for that. So it looks like we don't have any other questions, and we're coming up to a little after 7 o'clock here. So thank you both so much for joining us. This was a lovely event. We are so happy that you were able to do this with us today. And thank you for everybody joining on behalf of Brookline Booksmith. If you haven't read Danielle's book, Ramifications, I highly recommend it. It is so beautiful. I'm going to sign off here, but thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you everybody who was here, and thank you, Alejandro. We can go back to speaking in Spanish now.
Yeah, we are going to speak a lot of Spanish now, from now on. Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.